Hi, this is Jim Musser with Upstream Ministries, and welcome back to Views from Downstream. I have a question for you. Have you ever noticed how learning in the church is so passive? Have you really ever thought about that? So, a typical church service is for the teaching, is for a 30 to 40 minute sermon message, and then everybody basically goes home. Now, some churches in a bulletin will have a few blanks to write some notes, but that's basically it. You have a message and then you go home. And then you come back the next week, you have another message and you go home. But it's all passive, nothing, you don't really participate in the teaching that is being given. You listen. And if your church still has Sunday school classes, typically there's a teacher and typically there's a lesson and sometimes there's some discussion. But again, there's not really any or much active participation. It's usually listening. You may talk about the subject, but there's not much doing about it. You could talk about prayer, but there's very little practice in prayer. And in a sermon, they may be talking about sharing the gospel, but there's no opportunity given to practice doing that. And in the same way, small groups can be like that as well. There can be some discussion, but there's not really many activities in which to kind of further the teaching. And you go to conferences. Christian conferences are very popular with Christians and churches. And those conferences typically are very passive in terms of learning. You go to hear the main speaker. You go to workshops and you hear somebody else, more speakers talk. And that's what it is. I remember being at a conference a couple of years ago and we sat at round tables, which was great. I thought that was very helpful. But basically, the whole time was given to the speakers. And then, like each session, morning session, afternoon session, there was about 10 minutes, literally, given for discussion and application. And I think that that's one of the challenges that the church has before it, is if all we're doing is encouraging passive listening, then we're not going to make disciples. Now, Jesus taught, and I've said this before, he taught, but he also traveled with his disciples and showed them what to do, how to do it, and he actually gave them instructions to do it. And that's how they became disciples that could go out and disciple others. How much is the church today doing any of that? There may be some workshops, and maybe there's some practice in that and training, but I think there's not very much of that. And when we think of parents discipling their kids, the parents need to know how to live out the Christian life in a very active way, not just hearing about it. And the Christian life is made up more than just studying the scriptures. It's putting the word into practice, and that's where the local church often falls very short. We don't give people in the church time to practice how to live that out. And I think that's so crucial to do so. So I want you to think about that as we look ahead to Wednesday, is how does your church go about discipling, training? Is it as passive as I describe it? Or are you part of the exception where your church really does do training and gives members opportunities to really learn and practice and then go out and train others? Because that's what the church is supposed to be doing. And if it's not doing it, then it's not being faithful to the models that we see in Scripture. So we'll see you back here Wednesday to talk more about this. In the meantime, have a great day, and we'll see you on Wednesday.